Hello again. Here are one or two random reflections on life in our country. 40 years ago, it was possible to walk into a bank and open an account without any identification whatever. You could simply walk in, give your name and address, open the bank account, and walk out with the account opened. I know because I did so at the old Midland Bank. It was simply taken for granted that you and the bank could agree to such a thing without any involvement on the part of the government or anybody else. At that time, one could rent a flat in the same way, or get a job, as long as you had a national insurance number. 5 years ago, one could go and vote in an election without needing any identification. 20 years ago, there was no need for notices by a riverbank telling people that fishing at night was prohibited and that you had to return to the water the fish that you caught. These are a few ways that the presence of large numbers of foreigners in Britain have had an adverse impact on all our lives. It is illegal now for a landlord to rent anybody a room without checking that that person has the right to live in this country. They have to see passports or residence permits and photograph them and keep copies. It's the law. This means, incredibly, that an English person whose family have lived here for 1,000 years has to produce his or her passport in order to rent a flat in their own country. It's the law, and it is, of course, designed to deter illegal immigrants from living here. In the same way, if you wish to get a job now in England, you will have to prove to an employer that you have the right to live and work in your own country, and the only way that most English people can do that is by showing their passports. We take this for granted now. But at one time you could simply sign up with an employment agency and be sent off at once to a temporary job somewhere. Now things are far more complicated because copies will have to be made of your passport and so on. It is virtually impossible for an English person born in this country to get work without showing a passport. 40 years ago, this would all have been regarded as a dystopian vision of a hideous authoritarian future. But of course, we now take it for granted that if we do not have a passport, then there are many things that we will not be able to do. Anybody opening a bank account these days will know what a complicated business it is. This is to defeat money launderers, of course. What nobody likes to say out loud is that this is because of foreigners who came to Britain, saw that the banking system relied on honesty and trust, and then promptly set out to exploit it for criminal purposes. 40 years ago, anybody angling in this country would hardly need to be told that they mustn't take the fish that they caught home and eat them for dinner. Nor would they be likely to turn up at a lake in the middle of the night and see how many fish they could catch and take away, leaving few for anybody angling for pleasure the next day. The influx of Eastern Europeans during the last Labour government destroyed that particular sense of trust, because rivers and lakes were simply viewed as a source of free food. This has changed the nature of fishing in this country. Don't even get me started on people cutting the heads off swans and then taking them home for Sunday dinner. No, I'm not making this up either. In electoral districts with a lot of Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, areas such as the London borough of Tower Hamlets, there's been a good deal of dodgy voting practices. Things such as postal votes and accompanying voters into booths to make sure that they vote for the right candidate. Then too, there is a system of so-called family voting, where a man will take his wife and adult children to vote and make sure they all vote his way. This led to a crackdown on corrupt electoral practices, which means that we all now need our passports or driving licences if we wish to vote. These are just a few of the ways that immigration has changed the British way of life for good. If large numbers of foreigners had not come to this country to make their homes, then these changes would not have taken place. Hand on heart, would any viewers have imagined 30 or 40 years ago that the day would come when they had to produce a passport to get a job in their own country, or even to cast their vote in an election? The idea would have been thought absurd. To put the case in a nutshell, our country and its traditions have been trashed, and from being one of the most laid-back, liberal and informal countries in the world, we have moved towards a similar pattern of authoritarianism as was once seen in the Soviet Union. All this is a direct result of immigration, and of that there is not the least doubt. The recent past is quite unrecognisable now, and it need not have been this way. We have lost a precious and distinctive way of life which had no equal in the world, and it will never be recovered.